The body of all legal practitioners in the country, the Nigerian Bar Association, has chosen to participate in the national conference. The professional body is, however, dissatisfied with the list of conference delegates. In a letter of protest addressed to the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the NBA rejected the single slot given to it. A former president of the bar, Olisa Agbakoba, also believes that an exercise of this nature requires more legal input.
NBA got a very small number of representatives, just one. I thought that was a bit too small, given the fact that it's a lot of law. So I would have liked to see NBA get more. I would have thought that the NJC would have been better suited to nominate the 6 judicial representatives and not the president. The legal outcomes obviously seems to be going to the National Assembly, and I have no problem with that.
The concerns of these lawyers are all about adding value to the process, and these, according to them, can only be done if the right things are put in place before the flag-off of the conference. Shola Sheeli, Channels Television News.
Well, while we talk the national conference, something else is on the front burner. That's the centenary celebrations, and the history of this country may not be complete without the mentioning of the ancient town of Lokoja in Kogi State. In this special report, our correspondent Loretta Chiogo tells Nigeria's centenary story from Lokoja and the loss of inherent tourism potentials.
Located in the north-central region of Nigeria, Kogi State is carved out from Benue and Kwara states in 1999 by the Ibrahim Babangida-led military government. The state boasts of a population of 5 million people and has a uniqueness that other states will strive to rival. The bold legacies left there by the colonial masters. The confluent state plays a major role as Nigeria celebrates 100 years of the coming together of the northern and southern protectorates.
Lugat's office is here, that's where we are. His house is on top of Party. That's where his wife, Lady Flora Shaw, named Nigeria, looking at the confluence, the Niger area. That's where you got the name Nigeria. So a country that was named here in Lokoja by the Governor General who started his operations from here is the most significant city with regards to the centenary. So it should rightly be flagged off here. And we are still lobbying to see if that can be done.
Mr. Mubo Enyola is the permanent secretary in the state's Ministry of Culture and Tourism. He tells us that the government house remains a major colonial relic to the state, though with some modern touches. The former Governor General of Nigeria, Lord Lugard, ran his government from here.
There is a place that is called Magazine Hill within Lokoja, old Lokoja settlement, that we believe some armory are still buried, and live armories. We've discovered some in the past. So that place is reserved and nobody touches it. That used to be the headquarters of the West African Frontier Force.
The ride to the mountaintop is a rather twisting one. It's 458.3 meters above sea level and still houses the Lord Lugard's rest house. We are told Lugard stays here to overlook his merchant ships and servants who wear blacks. This ancient and agrarian town is endowed with relics it's not making money from. The cenotaph erected in remembrance of the British and Nigerian heroes who participated in the First and Second World Wars is the home for goats. Sets of prefabricated houses whose materials were said to have been brought to Lokoja from England, among others, are viewed unhindered.
These relics are tourism potentials that could equal oil. But because Nigeria is a very wasteful nation, the federal government has refused to look into the potential, the tourism potential of Lokoja. And I bet you, if the federal government decides to focus on the tourism potential of Lokoja, it will generate at least a quarter of what oil gives you. The grave sites there are those of colonial military officers who fought several wars here. They are there. If you take these things and put them on the net, their great-grandchildren will want to come and see their graves.
Lokoja, the capital of Kogi State, is a 2-hour drive from the federal seat of government in Abuja, but looks to be struggling with development. The beauty of Nigeria lies in our cultural diversity, but with a lot of potentials yet untapped from our naturally endowed resources, the country may only keep counting in age with visibly slow achievement. Loretta Chiogo, reporting from Mount Party in Kogi State for Channels Television.
After the break on News Track, the protests in Ukraine continue and the president returns to work after a sick leave. That's on the foreign scene.
Plus, in the world of sports, Nigerian trio of Ejike Ozenyi, Kunle Odunlami and Rabiole are named amongst the best 11 from the African Nations Championship.
Please join us again.
The world is an ever-changing global village. Hunger, conflict, and the quest to maintain established territories form the next frontier of discussions that determine the world we choose to live in. Every word, every discussion, every agreement or disagreement is crucial. Be part of the next frontier. Be part of Diplomatic Channel, only on Channels Television.
In the world of business, as the increase in the cash reserve requirement on the public sector deposits held up by banks takes effect from tomorrow, February 4th, yields on Nigeria's local debt are expected to edge up. Borrowing costs are also expected to rise this week due to a combination of the central bank's liquidity tightening measures and offshore investors selling local debt.
Yields on 3 benchmark bonds included in JP Morgan's Emerging Market Government Bond Index rose by more than 30 basis points last week on growing risk aversion by offshore investors after the U.S. Federal Reserve pushed ahead with scaling back its bond buying stimulus. The yield on the 5-year bond was at 13.52% on Friday, compared with 13.17% a week ago, while the 7-year paper was 32 basis points higher at 13.61%, and 10-year bond was trading at a yield of 13.57%, up 34 basis points. Meanwhile, interbank lending rates are expected to rise sharply this week ahead of a planned debit of about 750 billion naira to meet the central bank's new cash reserves requirement. Last week, lending rates closed unchanged at an average of 10.3%, staying unchanged for the 3rd consecutive week. Traders attribute this to a large pool of idle funds in the system from matured open market operations debt, interest paid on bonds, and cash posting for Parliament members' allowances. The secured open buyback, that's OBB, remained unchanged at 10.15%. That's 1.85 percentage points lower than the central bank's benchmark rate. Overnight placement was steady at 10.25%, while core money closed at 10.50%, and that's the same as the previous week. The CBN is due to debit banks' accounts for the new CRR this week.
And staying on the foreign scene, he pushed aside incessant protests demanding that he stepped down and return to office after 4 days of illness. That's the president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. He has not been seen in public since last Wednesday, as he was said to be suffering from a fever and breathing problems. But now he's feeling well again. However, the political crisis has continued unrelenting in his absence, with thousands on the streets of the capital, Kyiv.
Meanwhile, opposition leader Dmitry Bulatov has arrived in Lithuania for medical treatment. He's the man who appeared on TV last week saying he'd been abducted and tortured. Thousands are currently in the square, which has become a focal point for the opposition. Many of the demonstrators want closer ties with the EU, but that's a deal which hasn't been satisfied.
Thailand might have headed to the polls on Sunday to choose a new government, but the snap election is unlikely to settle the increasingly violent political standoff between the government of Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra and the People's Democratic Reform Committee. Instead of uniting the country, the